I don't have much. I'm going to keep it short and get Matt going. Just a couple things. Bathrooms are right down, hallways right there to the right and left. There's a table with stickers and other awesome swag and things. Swag with shirts, but other fun things to play with. There's still a ton of pizza. I know there is. Please take as much as you want. We have plenty. Also, Rex, group sitting right there, brought some hot sauce he's been working on, which is amazing and delicious. You can actually try some, put some on your pizza. It's actually really good. He's trying to also help with them, so I guess take one and don't worry about not getting any money. Too much. He made too much, so it's free, which is, I mean, free things, right? So thank you, Rex. It's delicious. Bring more. And if you want to start a business, let me know. 5149. So the only last thing I have to intro is that DevOps Days Detroit was a massive success. I helped plan it, so it makes me feel good. Thank you to everyone who was involved, helped volunteer, and really helps make DevOps community in Southern Michigan and beyond. So we are already in the planning stages for next year, and I'm already looking for people to help work with me to make it an awesome event. And there's a series of different types of work to be done and things to optimize. We were like 286, I think, total attendees. We're aiming to go over 300, maybe 50. So we're going to be hustling a little bit more, and we'd love to have more of you be part of the crew. Without further ado, I think that's all I have. Matt, I'm moving to Azure. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. So my name is Matt McLane. I'm a DevOps engineer here at Criteo on the CBS DevOps team. Let's see. I have 20 years of experience in IT, dating back to the days when Rex and I worked at WCC. And I enjoy long walks on the beach or in the woods and automating all the things. That's me. So I'd like to start with a question. How many of you guys have experience with Azure at this point? Okay, so about half-ish, I don't know, some. That's fine. I'm not going to go into, like, this is what Azure is and show you around. Actually, I'm probably not going to go into Azure at all. But I'm going to instead talk about our journey. I thought of this talk as like a travel memoir. So I wanted to start with how we got where we are, what we built along the way, and then some final thoughts and lessons learned and what our impressions. So that's the format, 3 parts of the story, and so we'll go to chapter 1. So not so long ago, it was in May of 2016 that I joined this company called HookLogic here in this building. HookLogic was an ad tech company that had built a, hold on, sorry, I don't have my speaker notes. I had to print them out. It was an ad tech company that had built an advertising exchange so that advertisers could deliver advertisements. Brands could deliver advertisements on publisher websites. So think Target has sponsored ads. Criteo, or not Criteo, HookLogic provides those ads and that marketplace for those ads to get there. That's what we do. When they hired me, they really wanted to move from their old AWS accounts to new ones so that they could take advantage of VPCs and enhanced security and rebuild their pipeline in an organized way using CloudFormation and all that. HookLogic was really built all on AWS. It used a lot of S3. It used a lot of Lambda. Our whole built on Lambda, and everything was in AWS. So I spent the first good chunk of my time here building this new pipeline with CloudFormation and Jenkins and making that work so that we could get our immutable images into AWS. And then October of 2016, we were bought by Criteo. Criteo does much the same thing, just in the advertising space, just on a different level. And so they bought us because we complemented each other, and we, as an entire company, we provide, more of that advertising stack. There, as is normal when you get bought by a bigger company, there are some differences. And one of the biggest differences with Criteo is that they aren't in the cloud. They run on bare metal infrastructure in several data centers around the world that they manage. And they're very proud of that infrastructure. And they should be. There's some reasons for that decision. You know, one of them is that they have really large clusters. Criteo runs the largest Hadoop cluster in Europe. They're based in France. So it would cost a lot of money to run that Hadoop cluster in the cloud. And we know because we spent millions of dollars a year running our own Hadoop cluster. But the other big reason that Criteo has bare metal is that they can put their servers right in the same data center as the places where they're sending their advertisements. So they co-locate their data centers with, say, Facebook, right? And that means that their advertisements are much faster and show up on Facebook faster than anybody else, and there's a big advantage for them there. So when they bought us, one of the first things that we had to do was they told us we had to move off from AWS. Everything had to be moved off of AWS, and there's two primary big reasons for that. One is cost savings. You know, they have this huge Hadoop cluster already, so why should we have a duplicate one in the cloud? And that makes sense to reduce our redundant infrastructure, and also, you know, they have support teams that already manage things. So we moved we've spent the past 2 years moving everything from AWS into these Criteo data centers. Another big reason for that is that Amazon is our biggest competitor. Amazon's the big monkey in the room. We think of it like King Kong. And you know, what Criteo is trying to do is help all these other companies survive in today's marketplace where Amazon is really dominating everybody. So you have companies like Sears that, you know, or Kmart, right? I think went bankrupt. And right, you have all these places that are really actually struggling. And part of that is because they're all trying to compete with Amazon, and we're trying to help them do that. It doesn't make sense for us to run our infrastructure on Amazon if that's the situation. We also had our biggest client for us is Walmart, as you might expect. And Walmart has said that they don't want any of their business partners to use AWS for that reason. So these two reasons, all these reasons combined, we had to move our stuff off. So we spent the past 2 years doing that. And here we are, about done with that migration. And so where does that leave our team, the DevOps team, whose job it was to maintain our AWS cloud infrastructure? And the answer to that is we don't know. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to show Criteo that the cloud still has a place, that there are some workloads that make sense to have the cloud, to have in ephemeral workloads that you spin up and they go away and you only pay for what you use. There's also, you know, some things that are probably cheaper to run in the cloud than to have all that infrastructure. So we set out to kind of show our company what we could do there. And the first thing we wanted to do, was take all the lessons we had learned from, you know, our original pipeline and then the second pipeline we built, and then build a third one that's even bigger, better, faster than it had been before. And I know I'm mixing my metaphors with RoboCop and $1 Million Man, but bear with me. So that's what we did. The first thing we did was we built a new pipeline to get things into Azure and spin it up and spin it down and all of that and manage it in a good way. And so that's what we. Oh, and then we're going to build services on top of that, and services that will show some value, and then hopefully everything will go forward. So that's kind of where how we got to where we are. And so then my next part is, what did we build? How do we manage that Azure infrastructure? Oh, the reason why Azure, I didn't go over that. The biggest reason why we picked Azure was that Criteo kind of already had a lot of it in place. We used Office 365. Because of that, we had an enterprise agreement with Microsoft already. All of our user accounts are already there, and it was really quick and easy to spin up our stuff in Azure because we already had those things in place. As opposed to, say, Google Cloud or Google Compute or any of the other clouds out there, Azure was really a quick and easy win for us. We do have the idea that Criteo could be at some point be multi-cloud and could benefit from multiple places, but we don't see, until there's a real need for that, we wanted to focus on kind of one thing. But that did drive our choice in tools. So for instance, we didn't choose to use Azure ARM templates, which is the equivalent of CloudFormation templates, and instead we used a third-party tool, right? So what did we build? We took a bunch of tools, some that Criteo was already using, some that they weren't, and we stitched them together to make a pipeline. My goal here is just kind of show you what that pipeline kind of looks like in a brief way. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a change. And then, yeah, then that'll kind of show you the tools. So for us, it all starts in Terraform. And I know this is small. My point here isn't to teach you Terraform. It's just to show you it starts in Terraform. We chose Terraform because, again, down the road, it would be a unified language between clouds. And so, while we can't use the Terraform templates that we write for Azure in Google, we would be using the same language. We would be using the same methodologies, and all the tools would be in place. So Terraform, it was.
Did you have Terraform in it already?
We didn't. Before we used just cloud, or we used CloudFormation. And Terraform, this was really when we spun up Terraform. And that was one of the reasons was because we had learned that CloudFormation kind of had some limitations, and we would run into those limitations. Whereas Terraform gave us a lot more flexibility, and we really like it, or at least I really like it. I think the other guys on my team also really like it. Here, it's good. Yep, Dory. So Terraform it is. And so what we do is we write our Terraform template in our repo, and then we do a change request. Now Criteo uses Garrett instead of Git. That was the company standard, so that's what we built our stuff on. This is what Garrett looks like. It's different than Git in that you don't really use branches and merge requests. You just do a change request on the master branch, and then it gets reviewed and merged in. So how our pipeline works is when I do that change request, it comes in here and creates a review, and we have, you can't really see this, but I'll walk you through it a little bit. We have a bot, a pre-submit script, and that bot goes and does a few things. It checks that our Terraform code is formatted. It checks that it's valid. It does those two things. There's a few other small things, and then the biggest thing it does is it creates a plan. So it runs Terraform plan to tell us what this change is going to do, and puts it in, puts a link in the code review so that somebody can go in and review that plan and see, oh, this change request is going to create an Azure resource group. They can expand that out and see the details. And then, oh, it's also going to create this thing called a shared image, pop gallery and a shared image, and so on and so forth. It shows it for prod, it shows it for pre-prod. Great, so we have the plan, we know what the commit's going to do, and then the next step is that somebody reviews it, and that's where this comes in, and once they approve, they give it a +2. This is just regular. And dude, you can merge it, and the commit gets merged. Great. So now my changes have been merged to our repository, and that kicks off a Jenkins pipeline. The Jenkins pipeline goes through, and using Terraform has a couple steps that really don't do much at this point. But the big thing it does is it automatically applies to pre-prod using Terraform. Runs Terraform and does a Terraform apply. And then it waits for a human to say go, and then it'll do that same apply to prod. We control this using Terraform workspaces, for those that are familiar with Terraform. Great, so now we now have code that we write, and we review, and then it gets into production. There's a couple other steps. Whenever we do a deploy, in the background, we also run inspec. Inspec is a tool from Chef that does integration testing. And what you can do with it is you can test your cloud infrastructure to validate that your pieces are all there. Now this is ugly, I know, and I'll talk about why that is in a moment. But the point here is all these dots. These are all the tests we have. So what it does is it validates that our virtual networks exist and are configured as specified, that the subnets exist and their IP address ranges are correct. It verifies the peering connections are all set up. Basically, we have tests that say, did this change anything that we really care about, our underlying infrastructure? And so every commit, we verify that we didn't break anything. That's what this does. So we do that twice. Now there's other tools in this picture. You know, Slack. We send messages to Slack so we kind of know what's going on. We send alerts to Opsgenie. We won't cover them all. It's not mind blowing. It's not big, but for us it really is a lot smoother, and it gets our changes into Azure in as organized a fashion as it can be. So, having built all that over the past, say 6 months, what did we've had a lot of time to look at Azure and play with Azure and all that. So let's get back to Azure. Oh, future enhancements. I meant to talk about this. What are we going to do? We have some future enhancements. We want to do, inspect. The big thing we learned about inspect is we set this up so that it would validate our cloud infrastructure, and then about 2 weeks later, they deprecated the resource that we had to use because they made a big change. Great. So the next step for us was to start contributing to that open source project to build the resources that weren't there or that we needed to have to replace the old version and get rid of that deprecated piece. So we've been not only contributing to the open source project, but kind of wrote the manual on how to contribute to the open source project. If you're interested, that's out there. It's pretty cool. So we've done that kind of stuff. You know, we want to do more Terraform modules, and we want to get to the point where other people are consuming our Terraform modules. That's kind of, you know, the direction we'd like to see. We've talked about Docker and using that to isolate our Terraform run environment so that we're not reinstalling Terraform on the Jenkins server every time. But we're waiting on our Jenkins server to be upgraded so it can support Docker. We really like a Terraform validation tool, meaning, so when you run Terraform validate, it'll tell you whether your Terraform templates are valid. But if you've made like if you selected a VM size that isn't valid, it won't catch that. We'd like a tool that does that goes and checks, you know, did all the things I build in my Terraform, is it actually going to work? There is that kind of tool for AWS, but not for Azure. So we've talked about building that. We want to use Prometheus for alerts. And there's this cool project called Project Atlantis that HashiCorp just bought, or at least they hired the 2 developers that were building it. And we've looked at that as a way to kind of replace this pipeline. Problem is it doesn't work with Garrett, and we don't know if we can get it to work with Garrett. So one of our slightly longer term visions is to either kind of get that to work with Garrett or to build something like it. Yeah, we can talk more about Project Atlantis. It's definitely worth looking into if you use Terraform. Yeah?
Those are like more evaluate like other.
For inspec, I don't know of any other tool that will run and do the validation checks the way that inspec does. ServerSpec is more like, is this server built according to spec, right? Does it have this service and this app installed in this file and this place and all that? InSpec is kind of built, is like the next generation of server spec, right? The same guys wrote it. And they really built this capability into check your cloud infrastructure. And it's really cool. You can do it with AWS as well as Google, I think, and Azure. And it works, I mean, it works pretty well, other than the fact that, you know, they changed it on us. And so all these resources now need to be written as part of that open source project. It's a moving target. Yeah.
You talked about your Jenkins server. Is that running on the Criteo bare metal? Or?
Yeah, so that was a server. Those are servers that Criteo has and supports, and we just use their pipeline. Yeah, but that was part of what we had to do was thread this needle of, you know, building it ourselves and using the corporate or the company's services, right? So we really wanted, you know, we needed to use Garrett and we needed to use Jenkins because that's kind of the company standard. And by using those, people, you know, when they come to our team or our office, they kind of are already familiar with those tools and how they work. And so, you know, one of the things we want to do, one of our visions is to make this more available to others in the company, right? And we have this idea that someday other teams will be able to create cloud resources by, you know, committing code, Terraform code. They can consume a module that we write, put it in their own TF file, and then our pipeline can spit it out, and they'll already be familiar with how that works, and it's not building something new.
Did you guys brainstorm the kinds of things that you wanted to build to demonstrate that the cloud shows value?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
absolutely.
Because we
Yep.
talk about which ones.
Sure, I can talk about that right now. So, so the big two projects we're working on right now to show the cloud has value for Criteo. One is storage, because Criteo doesn't have an S3 equivalent. It doesn't do blob storage very well, and we feel the cloud can do that really quick, really easy. We only pay for what we use, all that stuff. And so we're in the process of making it super easy to spin up a storage account. We have a module for that spins up the storage account and a container and permissions or something like that. We have a script that'll create the TF file, and it's highly documented what you need to specify to have it do what. And so that's kind of one of our first attempts. Another thing we've worked on is, we call it Project Maelstrom, and it's a load testing application. Is anybody familiar with oh shoot, what was the tool we used to use? What? No. It's for load testing. BlazeMeter. Is anybody familiar with BlazeMeter? So we use BlazeMeter in years past to send lots of traffic, right? So we do advertisements, and we would load test before the holidays. We'd send 10,000 requests a second to a single server to see it, you know, and more, see at what point it would break. We would spend $10,000 a year on BlazeMeter for a couple months, 2-3 months. And we thought we could build that. It's just JMeter and spinning up boxes, which we know how to do, and an interface. So that's what we've done, is we built this tool that spins up a bunch of boxes in Azure and runs JMeter against a target that you specify. And so you can send a whole lot of traffic, and then it goes away, right? And then the idea is that, okay, cool, now we have it spinning up in one region. Really, we can make that happen in any region, and that's really easy.
Probably a lot cheaper than $10,000.
And it's way, way cheaper than $10,000, because we're only paying for the 10 minutes that you spend it, and and we can use free boxes too. So that you know, those are our two first projects, and then we have a couple others that we're kind of thinking about.
Your little dots.
Yeah.
Are you like producing any reports to the tests?
Oh yeah. So well, in there, what we do is when we do a deployment, it just tests and we look for failures. We also run that every hour on its own, so that if somebody goes in and runs, if somebody goes in and changes something and the test says different, we'll know about it. And actually, we have that right now because, or we did. And then that it gets reported in, hope there's nothing in here, guys. Here you go. So we had our friendly IIT changed our external IP address. And so we had to change the network security group in Azure so that we could get to external boxes. So so our inspect tests started failing, and so we get notified whenever that happens. Until we go fix it, we're going to get this every hour. That's kind of the idea.
Other things.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to that part or point. We could do like a cool report in HTML or whatever and have it email out, but really we just want to know when there's a problem.
Yeah.
So normally we just report dots and then it'll report failure. That's just a switch. Cool. So the third chapter of the story is kind of what did we learn? So for this, and this is really like kind of the kind of the main point, is what I did was I sat down my team in a room, and we talked about what was good and what was different, kind of so just different, and what was frustrating about Azure. And I thought I'd share those things with you, and we could talk about them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the different, and then go to the frustrating, and end with the good, because Mom always said finish on a good note. So what's different? The first thing we noticed was the UI and the terminology are just different. Yeah, and that took a little while to get used to. They'll call, one thing is called one thing in one place, instances versus virtual machines. What's the difference there? Network security group in Azure is different than a network security group in AWS, and we had to figure that out. There's a lot of VNets versus VPCs, so on and so forth. And the UI is plain different in Azure. It's got this pane dealio that you sometimes get lost in, but there's some advantages to the way they have it set up too. So in AWS, if I want to look at the East region, and then I want to look at the machines in the West region, I can't do that at the same time in the same window. I have to have two different windows. But in Azure, it can all be there in one window, and I can see all my machines across all my regions in one view, and then filter it down from there. So there's some really good things about their UI, and there's some things that we don't like about it, and we feel we can get lost in it sometimes. So it's different. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. Subscriptions. So in AWS, we had our prod subscription, we had our pre-prod subscription, or our dev subscription, and they were separate. And if you wanted to go from one to the other, you had to log out and log back in, or something like that. In AWS, nope, that's in AWS. In Azure, they have this construct called a subscription. So we have one account, and then within that account, you have multiple subscriptions. And then with the subscriptions, deal with who gets the bill, and it's like a sub-partition. So we have one account, one Azure account that we don't control, but we have access to 4 subscriptions: one prod, one pre-prod, one experimental, and then our test kitchen subscription. And that's how we have it broken out today. We don't know if it's good or bad. We can't really, we're still trying to figure out whether or not we like subscriptions. They're there, they're just kind of different. But it's something that you kind of got to wrap your head around, going from AWS to Azure, and what that means and how you're going to use them. Okay, so Azure, we feel Azure exposes the VM layer more. It's less of a black box. In AWS, you have your instance and you can control some of the stuff, but it's kind of black boxy, I think, right? And that's good. That's not bad, right? I don't have to manage any of that stuff. It's done for me. In Azure, they surface a lot more of that and let you see what's going on. So when you put a virtual machine, you have a virtual machine, you make decisions about whether it's in one rack or two, or that kind of thing. There's fewer availability zones, and so the references are more like if I were doing it if I were running Hyper-V in the office, right? It feels more like that. I have more, it's more surface. It's not good or bad, it's just different. One of the big ways this is seen is that network devices are separate from the VM. They're not necessarily attached. And so that's good because it gives me more control. I can set an IP address on a NIC, and I can have that NIC attached to a VM. And then if I want, I can move the NIC to a different VM, and everything goes with the NIC, which is cool. But and it's not just the IP; it accounts for the security group on it too, and whatever that NIC had. But it's more that we have to manage. We have a lot more pieces in Azure that we see, and we have to keep track of. And if we delete a VM, we have to make sure we delete all those pieces, right? You have to delete the network card and the disks with the VM, or as well as the VM, right? Network security groups. This took us a while to figure out because in AWS, network security groups are really bland. You just have a list of rules about what kind of traffic can get through, right? It's port, whatever, from this IP address, that's it. In Azure, it's more like a firewall. So you have to deal with the order of the rules. The source and the destination ports are in there, and all of that. But then on top of that, there's your network security group on your VM, and then there's a network security group on the subnet. And so the traffic actually has to go through two of these in order to get to your virtual machine. Now, that's good because it's better. You can have more, complicated, not complicated. You can have more granular security. Thank you. But it's more to manage, and it's more to wrap your head around. And it took us a little while to figure out how we wanted to have those things structured. So that was something new. And then there's a lot of pieces that we're just trying to figure out with serverless compute. We're trying to discover what that is in Azure, and there's a lot of pieces for it that we don't know the real difference between, say, Azure Automate and Azure Functions and Azure Web Apps, and when to use what where. That's a little something we're still discovering. So that's done with that. So then the stack for frustrating. We don't like figuring out the VM sizes we found to be opaque and not well documented. Oh yeah, ICMP support. Let me just tell you what. The first time somebody goes and says, I can't ping the VM, your VM's not working, and you go, no, Azure just doesn't do ICMP. They go, what? And that's where we are all the time. So just so you know, ICMP is supported on the private interfaces, so I can ping one VM to another, but I can't ping the internet. And from the internet, I can't ping a box. That's how it works. If it has to go to the internet or through the Azure firewall, they don't support ICMP, and I don't really know why. The number of secrets. We have to support 3 or 4 secrets in order to talk to Azure for every one of our accounts, and that is really frustrating. We wish it was just one. Users don't have an API key, and the closest thing we can do is have a service principal, and to use that, we have to have 3 secrets, and that's kind of ridiculous. We wish we could just have one. Third-party tool support. So as I've talked about the various tools we use, one of the things you might have noticed is that things change a lot, and that things aren't always there. They work, there's a tool for AWS, but there isn't one for Azure, and we find that all over the place. I think real is newer and has been less used, and is changing quickly. And so third-party tools haven't kept up, and they're just getting there to the point where they support it. That's just something we've come to expect, is that third-party tool support really is lacking. And our answer has been to try to contribute, and but that could be a serious issue, and we wish it wasn't that way. Another aspect that is difficult is that the Azure API is really monolithic, So as they add things, things don't necessarily get added to the API right away. And so that doesn't help the third-party tools keep up to date. Alerts, Azure alerts are not all we want them to be. We use them a little bit, but they don't aggregate as well as we want. And we've found some bugs. More on that in a second, because we also find Azure support beyond first level to be rather frustrating and slow. It could take several days for them to get back to us. And just to tell you a short story about Azure alerts. So I set up a bunch of Azure alerts, and then they weren't right. They were too noisy, so I deleted them. But they kept alerting. They're gone from the portal. They're gone from the API, but they keep firing. The answer from Azure support was to delete the notification group. So the email address that the alerts send to, delete that, and then we won't get notified anymore, which we did because we had to recreate it anyway. But we still see the alerts getting fired. And after 2 weeks of going back and forth with them, their answer right now is to delete the alert that's causing the problem, but not realizing that that's the whole problem, is that we had deleted the alert and it's still firing. So I'm still working on them with that. Yeah. The other thing we find frustrating is we're always on the bleeding edge with Azure. Like everything seems to be really new, and we have found situations where I go and read the Terraform documentation that says, here's how to build this Azure component. And I write my code on a Friday, and we don't release on Friday, so I come in on Monday, and I go to release my code, and it says, and Terraform says, I don't know what that is. I'm like, what are you talking about? You don't know what that is. Because the documentation says that you do. Well, as it turns out, it's because we needed to update Terraform because they had only added that resource 3 days before that. And it's that kind of turnaround, and everything is always on the bleeding edge. And that can be rather frustrating. So the good. We're on the bleeding edge, and that can be fun. In Azure, we get access to public previews all the time. There is like 90 some odd things that they added this past fall, and we have access to them really quickly and really early. And so 2 weeks ago, we said we want to be able to have our images that we build with Packer available in other regions. How do I copy them from region to region? And we start looking, and the answer was there is no way. That's what a lot of people were saying. And or there's this 10-step process to copy your image from one place to the other. And I was like, that's dumb. And then I found that they had just added a month ago a new piece called the shared image gallery that we could use to automate that. And it works beautifully, and we have access to it. It happens to be in public preview, but there it is.
You're saying you can't create an image?
No,
move it?
You can as of a month ago using the shared image gallery. Right. Wow. Right. You couldn't move it between regions. So the answer was to build it multiple times. And part of that was how Packer worked. But you could move it within the same region. Yes. That's what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. No. You couldn't move it between subscriptions either. It was a little limited. But now they've added a feature that lets you do that. And it does it automatically. With Terraform, you just specify what regions you want, and it automatically copies it everywhere. And then you can reference it dynamically. It's beautiful. And it's only a month old. So we have access to that, and I think that's pretty cool. So this bleeding edge aspect is kind of a love-hate aspect in our experience with Azure. Resource groups. We really like resource groups. And I know that AWS has resource groups now, but it didn't always. And when we built our things in AWS, it didn't have them. But Azure makes that up front. You always have to have everything in a resource group. And what that does, for those that aren't familiar, is it bundles all your resources together. So in one resource group, I can have my virtual machine, its network card, its hard drives, the subnet, the VNet, all the pieces that go with that server in one resource group. And then when I'm done with it all, I can delete the resource group, and it deletes everything with it. Or I can look at all those pieces as one, as one group, and I can look at the costs of that resource group and get across the spectrum of what that service costs. And that's really cool. We love resource groups. They're really good. Networking. Now, I kind of set up the networking for Azure and in AWS, and I'll tell you, Azure networking is kind of magical. And it just kind of works. I've never had to deal with routes in Azure where I did have to do all that in AWS. And more importantly, Azure has what they call a hub and spoke architecture that they support, and it's great. So I drew it on the board, how this works. So in Criteo, we have an express route connection to one VNet called the hub VNet. Think of an express route connection like Direct Connect, right? It's very fast. And then we have all these other VNets out here that we connect to it with peering connections. Now, you can build that in AWS. The problem with AWS is that from this VNet, I can't talk to the home office because it doesn't traverse the peering connections. It's only one VPC to VPC. In Azure, though, it just automatically works that I set up, all I have to do is check a box. And from this VNet, I can talk all the way back to my home office. The reason that's great is I can set up that express route connection once, and then I can spin up new VNets and automatically create the peering connections, and that new VNet can automatically talk back to my home office. And I don't have to do anything more with any other teams or VPN connections or any of that. That all works. It's great. So then I went and I set up another region, and I found that peering connections don't go between regions, and I was really sad that I was going to have to deal with, have one hub in each region, until I realized that I can share the express route, and the traffic goes across the Microsoft backbone and gets into my office, and so I can share that express route connection 10 times. On the cheapest plan, if you pay more, you can get more, and that's awesome. It means that I can really create whatever dynamic network topology I want in my Terraform code, and I don't have to bother the network team at all because they've already set their piece up. And it goes even further. Microsoft's got some new offerings where you can use their Azure backbone to interconnect your offices. If you have like an office here and an office in California, you can have those two talk together across the Microsoft backbone instead of having to have your own links. That's pretty sweet. We're not using that today, although I have talked to the network team about looking into that as a backup to our current network links, because we have these interconnected data centers and we pay a lot of money for very, very fast connections between them. But wouldn't it be cool if we could have backup connections that we don't pay for unless we use them? That'd be awesome. So networking in Azure is pretty sweet. It's kind of magic. Locations. I believe, looking up earlier, AWS has 16 regions. Microsoft has 54. Now, maybe that doesn't make a lot of difference to most companies, but for us, we're an advertising company, and it's huge for us to be as close as we can to whoever is trying to get that ad. For us, latency is our key metric that we have to track, and we need that to be as low as possible. So being able to put machines anywhere in the world, in the middle of America instead of on the edges, that's a huge thing for us. And so I think we really like the number of regions and the availability we have there.
Does that mean it's going to be competitive with the co-location?
I mean, there are definitely parts of the world. So Brazil, for instance, we don't have a data center in South America, and AWS has one, and Microsoft has one or two. We need to put stuff in that region because the latency is too high from a Criteo data center, right? And our stuff much quicker than Criteo can spin up a new data center in a region. So one thing that happened in the past couple months is that Criteo acquired another company, and their machines were on a cloud provider called OVH, which is bigger in Europe. And Criteo wants to have them prove that their business is going to work in the United States. So they wanted to spin up their servers. Unfortunately, OVH had 2 data centers. One was in the east coast of Canada, and they were just bringing one up as we were talking about it on the west coast of Canada, but nothing in the middle. So we were able to, within 2 weeks, spin up their entire infrastructure in Azure in the middle, right? So we have in Iowa and somewhere else. Doesn't really matter. We have 2 regions in Azure, and we were able to spin it up really quickly. And we were able to do that because we had this pipeline, and we were able to just write it in Terraform code using modules and spin up 40 servers. That's no big deal, right? It would have taken a really long time for Criteo to spin up a new data center. Yeah.
What is the effect of the latency? The ads load slow?
Oh, yeah. Not only that.
Or do the pages the ads are on?
Right. So the page, if our ads are slow, the page will load slow, which means the publishers will turn us off, which means we don't make any money. Yeah. We had and that happens. That can happen really quick for us, right? We had an issue the other day or last weekend, where 20% of our traffic was too slow, and we had 5 publishers turn us off. And we don't know how much money we lost. Yeah, I think they're working that out. But yeah, if we get shut off, it's not only is that a problem, it's hard to get them to turn us back on.
So just to be clear though, when there's latency, yeah, it's going to be slow, of course, but the content
The page will load slow, yeah.
Why is that?
Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the whole page will load slow, but they will have a blank part in their page, and nobody wants that. Yeah.
That's useful to share with everybody. So,
Go ahead.
Yes, usually if the latency takes a while. Last little, like there's a study done where it's just like you don't load everything. It's like 2 seconds.
Yeah, we try to go. Our max is 200 milliseconds for our latency, and we have to, but much lower than that is better.
The reason I ask is sometimes I note that the ads just are slow. I can bear that. Sometimes the ad just totally block the page loading.
Sure.
Ad comes in, and I'm just wondering if that is a poor page design.
I can't speak too much about that, but I can tell you that Walmart will turn us off in a heartbeat if we're not quick. The Azure CLI we really love. I will say I think it's absolutely better than the AWS CLI, in part because it's modular. You can add a new piece to it with a command, and it'll, there's other companies will go out and add modules for the CLI. So for instance, there is a tool that another company built to copy images from one place to another. Unfortunately, it didn't work for us because it doesn't support the way Packer packs images. So that was sad. But the functionality is there, and as Microsoft or others build new functionality for the CLI, it gets added, and you can spin it up. You can also alias in the CLI, so you can take long strings and shorten them down, just kind of like Git, which we can't do with the AWS one. And then the other big thing is shell.azure.com. They have a cloud shell, so from any device, anywhere in the world, you can get to that Azure CLI without installing anything. And then in there, they have Terraform already pre-installed. They have all the, if you use Bash, it's in Bash. If you use PowerShell, it's in PowerShell. And they have all the tools built in, and including Visual Studio Code. So you even have an editor. It's pretty sweet. It's definitely worth checking out. Oh, we found we can resize VMs on the fly without restarting the box. And that's sweet. Like, oh, this VM's too big. I just changed the size, and it magically works. You don't have to do anything. Bigger, smaller, we've gone both ways. And the box just kind of knew. It was magical. Azure Frontline Support, like the tier 1 support, is really quick and good. We like them. We just don't like anybody beyond that. And then storage accounts. Storage accounts aren't just blob storage. They also include files, queues, and tables. So it takes like 4 or 5 AWS services and bundles them all together into one thing and gives you a SaaS token to authenticate, and that's really cool. Final thing is management locks. There's a flag. You can create a management lock on a VM or on a resource group or on a subscription, and it will keep anybody from changing anything in that or deleting anything in that. So that's really sweet because we set it on the resource. We set it on our prod network resource group, and nobody can delete the prod network or anything in it unless we remove it. Then we re-add it, and we have automated that. That's really cool. We really like that. So the moral of the story here, the end is, if you love working on the bleeding edge, you'll love Azure, because that's where Azure is. It has a lot of service offerings, tons there, and it's growing all the time, and it's definitely worth considering. That's it. That's what I got.
So a couple closing statements, and then I will let you guys ask them the questions because I have a bunch of questions as well.
Yeah.
One of them being, do you think you would go back to AWS? Like, is there anything for you that you're like, I really wish I could just be on AWS? Like, this just really bothers me. I'm so used to how AWS did it, or it works so much better. You know, it sounds like there's some really cool features, but there's other things that can be bothersome, etc.
Yeah, the biggest thing there for me is third-party tool support and just the realm of what tools you can use for AWS is there's a lot of things there, and a lot more people are have been using it for a long time, so it's much more. It's just more mature. That's the word I'm looking for.
More things supported,
right?
You know, yeah.
Having said that, I think Azure is growing a lot, like way faster than AWS is, as far as new product offerings and new things it does. That's the feel I have. Right. You know, and some of it's just different, you know. They both do the same thing at the end of the day. They just do it in different ways. It just depends on what's the specifics of what you need to do, right? So an example of this is machine learning. Azure has some huge machine learning pieces to it where you know, if you upload your data, it already has trained algorithms to analyze that data. And Azure, I think, is just spinning that out now, right? And that's been around in Microsoft for quite a while. A number of movies use Microsoft Azure's machine learning rendering engine, as it turns out, to render their stuff.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
So we'll get your slides out to everyone. That was a really great breakdown. One last thing. So we are not going to have a meeting next month. Enjoy the holiday. January we'll have a meeting. We'll have details on that coming out shortly. We're going to try to get that before the holiday. Get that out to you. I have no clue what it will be on, but I'm sure it will be pretty enticing. I want to thank Matt and Criteo, as well as our sponsors, Ithaca, Lamasoft, the CNCF, Fly.io, and my company, StockX. If any of you guys have topic ideas or any sort of location ideas or anything else, feel free to jump in the hashtag Orchestructure channel in the main A2 Slack network, and please say anything you want, and we'll soak that up and try to make it happen. So also one last thing we're starting to plan the next Orchestructure workshop. So we did a Saturday 4-hour session in, I believe, May of this past year, and it was amazing. This past summer, it was great. But we're going to try to do that again. Absolutely 100% going to happen. We need ideas from you guys. We need ideas on what people are trying to learn, new technologies people are trying to use, whether it's CI/CD, security, Azure, or GCP, other clouds that people might not. We'll get people to speed on cloud, Kubernetes, all the new stuff coming out. And usually, I think we did four courses last time, and we had some great It's kind of a hybrid of a talk slash, interactive session. So, you bring your laptops, we have lots of food, and we have a really good time. You learn a lot. So any ideas, seriously throw them at us. We're game for pretty much anything. So like I said, thank you for coming out and have a great holiday, everyone. Thanks again, Matt and Criteo. I think there's still food left, so go get some food.
Take pizza.
Oh,
Yeah, take pizza
you
home,
guys have
literally.
questions?
Yeah.
There's 3 of us on my team here, and so I'm going to point out Harold and Dory. They can answer questions too, unless they disappear.